Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he barely noticed. The exploration fleet had been traveling through this sector for 3 weeks, mapping new systems and looking for planets that humans could settle on. The Liberty was the flagship of their small fleet. Jake had served as her captain for 5 years, and he knew every sound the ship made. Right now, something felt different. The crew was tense, though they tried to hide it. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the communications station, her fingers dancing over the controls. She had been monitoring all frequencies for the past few days, picking up strange signals that didn't match anything in their databases. "Captain," Amy called out, her voice tight with concern. "I'm getting multiple contacts on long-range sensors. They're big, sir, really big." Jake moved to the tactical display where Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Burke was already working. Ryan had been with the fleet since the beginning, and Jake trusted his judgment completely. The tactical officer's face was grim as he studied the incoming data. 12 ships, Captain," Ryan reported. "Each one is at least twice the size of our biggest vessel. They're arranged in a formation that suggests military training. This isn't a merchant convoy or exploration group." Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan looked up from her station. She had been running diagnostics on their experimental systems all morning. "Sir, our new shield technology is ready for testing if needed. The kinetic weapons are also fully charged and operational." Jake nodded but kept his eyes on the display. The human fleet consisted of only 5 ships. Besides the Liberty, they had 2 destroyers called the Defiance and the Valor, plus 2 smaller frigates named the Courage and the Freedom. Against 12 unknown vessels, they would be badly outnumbered. "Distance?" Jake asked. 2 million kilometers and closing," Ryan answered. "At their current speed, they'll intercept us in 40 minutes. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Every person there understood what this meant. After decades of searching, humanity had finally encountered another intelligent species. The question was whether this meeting would be peaceful or hostile. Amy's station suddenly lit up with activity. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission. It's on multiple frequencies and includes what appears to be translation protocols." "Put it through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. The creature had gray skin, large, black eyes, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. When it spoke, the computer's translation system converted the words into English. "Primitive species," the alien said in a cold, emotionless voice. "You have entered sovereign hegemony space without authorization. I am Admiral Vextar of the 3rd Imperial Fleet. You will immediately shut down your engines and prepare to be escorted to processing stations. Any resistance will result in your complete destruction." Jake felt the tension on the bridge increase. This was not the first contact scenario they had hoped for. He looked around at his crew and saw determination, mixed with fear on their faces. "Amy, open a channel," Jake said calmly. "Channel open, sir." Jake stepped forward, making sure he was visible on the screen. "Admiral Vextar, I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Liberty. We are an exploration fleet from Earth, conducting peaceful surveys in what we believe to be unoccupied space. We were not aware that this area was claimed by your government." The alien admiral's expression didn't change. "Ignorance is not an excuse. The hegemony has claimed this entire sector for over 2,000 years. Your primitive technology simply could not detect our presence until now. You will comply with my orders immediately." Commander Lisa Grant, Jake's first officer, moved quietly to his side. She had been listening to the conversation while coordinating with the other ship captains through secure channels. Captain Sam Turner of the Defiance, Captain Alex Parker of the Valor, Captain Maya Johnson of the Courage, and Captain Steve Collins of the Freedom were all standing by, waiting for orders. "Admiral," Jake continued, "we have no desire for conflict. However, we also cannot simply surrender our ships and crews to an unknown government. Perhaps we could arrange a diplomatic meeting to discuss this situation." Admiral Vextar's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, but it looked more like a predator showing its teeth. "There will be no negotiations. The hegemony does not bargain with primitive species. You have 1 minute to comply or my ships will open fire." Dr. Helen Brooks, the fleet's specialist in alien cultures, had been monitoring the transmission from her station. She looked up at Jake with worried eyes. "Captain, based on their language patterns and behavior, I believe we're dealing with a species that has never encountered serious resistance. They expect immediate submission." Jake nodded and looked back at the screen. Admiral Vextar was waiting, clearly confident that the humans would surrender rather than face destruction. Around the bridge, Jake could see his crew preparing for whatever decision he would make. The tactical display showed the enemy ships moving into an attack formation. They were powerful vessels, armed with weapons that could probably destroy the human fleet with ease. But Jake noticed something in their positioning that suggested overconfidence. They were spreading out like they expected no real opposition. 30 seconds, Admiral Vextar announced. Jake looked at his crew one more time. These people had volunteered to explore the unknown regions of space. They had families back on Earth and the colonies, people who were counting on them to return safely. But they had also sworn an oath to protect humanity and everything it stood for. "Admiral," Jake said finally, his voice steady and calm, "I'm afraid we cannot comply with your demands. We are going to continue on our original course. If you wish to stop us, that is your choice to make." The alien's black eyes widened slightly. This was clearly not the response he had expected. The communication channel remained open, but neither side spoke for several long seconds. Jake turned to his crew. "All stations, battle ready. But remember, we don't fire first." The silence stretched between the two fleets like a taut wire ready to snap. Admiral Vextar stared at the human captain through the communication link, his black eyes showing confusion for the first time in decades. In all his years of service to the hegemony, no primitive species had ever refused his demands so directly. Captain Jake Morrison stood calmly on the bridge of the Liberty, his hands clasped behind his back. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, preparing for battle while maintaining an appearance of complete composure. The message was clear. Humanity would not be intimidated. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Vextar said slowly, "perhaps you did not understand. My fleet has enough firepower to reduce your ships to space dust in minutes. This is your final opportunity to surrender." Jake stepped closer to the screen, his blue eyes meeting the alien's dark gaze. "Admiral, I understood you perfectly the first time. You have weapons trained on human vessels in what we consider neutral space. We're going to continue on our course. If you want to stop us, you're going to have to fire first." Commander Lisa Grant watched her captain with admiration. She had served under Jake for 3 years and had never seen him back down from a challenge. While the Admiral spoke, she had been coordinating with the other human ship captains through secure channels. All 5 vessels were ready for combat, their crews trained and their weapons charged. On the Defiance, Captain Sam Turner reviewed his tactical options with his weapons officer. The destroyer was fast and heavily armed, designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat. Turner had fought pirates in the outer colonies and knew how to handle his vessel in a fight. Captain Alex Parker commanded the Valor, the other destroyer in the fleet. His ship carried experimental missile systems that Earth's military had been testing for months. Parker was younger than the other captains, but his crew trusted him completely. The 2 frigates, Courage and Freedom, were smaller but more maneuverable. Captain Maya Johnson had trained her crew on the courage to excel at electronic warfare and defensive operations. Captain Steve Collins commanded the Freedom, specializing in close-quarters combat and boarding actions. Admiral Vextar turned away from the screen to consult with his officers. Jake could see several aliens moving around what appeared to be the bridge of their flagship. Their technology looked advanced, but their movement suggested they were not used to dealing with unexpected situations. Dr. Helen Brooks monitored the alien communications, trying to understand their language and culture. What she heard concerned her. The hegemony forces were discussing how to make an example of the humans. They talked about capturing some alive for study and destroying the rest as a warning to other primitive species. "Captain," Helen called quietly, "they're not just planning to destroy us. They want to use our defeat as propaganda to keep other species in line. This entire encounter is about maintaining their image of invincibility." Jake nodded but kept his attention on the main screen. Admiral Vextar had returned, and his expression was harder than before. "I have consulted with Hegemony. High Command," the alien announced. "They have authorized me to use whatever force is necessary to secure your surrender. Your species will serve as an example of what happens to those who defy the Hegemony." "Admiral," Jake replied calmly, "you keep talking about what you're going to do to us. But we're still here. We're still on our original course. We're still waiting for you to make your choice." Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Burke had been studying the enemy formation during the conversation. The 12 hegemony ships were arranged in a classic intimidation pattern, designed to look overwhelming while actually being somewhat inefficient for actual combat. Their captains clearly expected the humans to surrender without a fight. Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan reported that all systems were operating at peak efficiency. The experimental shields were ready, and their new weapon systems had been tested extensively during the journey. Earth scientists had spent years developing technology specifically for encounters like this. Amy Rodriguez continued monitoring all communication frequencies. She had picked up chatter between the hegemony ships and their translation computers. "We're beginning to understand more of the alien language." What she heard made her nervous. "Captain," Amy reported, "they're discussing targeting our engines first. They want to disable us so they can take prisoners." Jake smiled grimly. "Let them try. Lisa, signal the fleet. Execute Formation Delta on my command." Lisa nodded and sent coded messages to the other ships. Formation Delta was a combat maneuver they had practiced dozens of times during their journey. To an outside observer, it would look like the human ships were scattering in panic, but it was actually a carefully planned tactical movement. Admiral Vextar was growing impatient. The human captain's calm defiance was unlike anything he had encountered in his long career. Every other species had either surrendered immediately or attacked in desperate fury. This controlled confidence was something new and disturbing. "Your courage is admirable but foolish," Vextar said. "Very well. If you will not surrender, you will be destroyed. All ships, prepare to fire." Jake could see weapons powering up on the hegemony vessels. Plasma cannons began glowing with deadly energy, and missile tubes opened to reveal antimatter warheads. The alien fleet had enough firepower to destroy a small moon. "Admiral," Jake said one final time, "you're about to make a mistake. We came here in peace and we tried to resolve this diplomatically. Whatever happens next is entirely your responsibility." Vextar's laugh was cold and harsh. "Your threats are meaningless, primitive. Watch as your ships burn." Jake turned to his crew. "All stations execute Formation Delta. Remember, defensive actions only until they fire. I want everyone to see clearly who started this fight." The human ships began to move, their engines flaring with brilliant light. To the hegemony forces, It looked like the humans were finally showing fear and trying to flee. Admiral Vextar felt satisfaction as he watched the primitive vessels scatter. "Fire!" he commanded. The first volley of alien weapons streaked through space toward the human fleet. Plasma bolts and antimatter missiles crossed the distance between the two forces in seconds. The battle for humanity's place in the galaxy had begun, but as the weapons approached their targets, something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't try to run. Instead, they moved with precision and purpose, their formation revealing itself as a carefully planned combat maneuver. Admiral Vexitar realized with growing alarm that he might have underestimated his opponents. The humans had just turned his attack into exactly the trap they wanted. The space between the two fleets lit up with deadly energy as Admiral Vextar's weapons fired. Plasma bolts and antimatter missiles streaked toward the human ships, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a city. The Hegemony Admiral watched with satisfaction, expecting to see the primitive vessels destroyed in moments. Instead, something impossible happened. The human fleet scattered in what looked like panic, but their movements were too precise, too coordinated. As the alien weapons reached their targets, the UES Liberty and Defiance suddenly blazed with energy fields that absorbed the plasma bolts like they were nothing more than flashlight beams. "Impossible," Admiral Vextar whispered as he watched his most powerful weapons fail against unknown human technology. Captain Jake Morrison stood calmly on the Liberty's bridge as the ship shook under the impact of enemy fire. The experimental, adaptive shields held perfectly, their energy patterns shifting and changing to counter each type of attack. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency. "Shields holding at 95%, reported Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan. "The adaptive systems are learning their weapon signatures. Each hit makes us stronger against their next attack." Commander Tony Lewis coordinated the fleet's defensive maneuvers from his tactical station. The plan they had developed during months of training was working perfectly. The smaller frigates, Courage and Freedom, used their superior speed and maneuverability to dodge between the larger alien ships, avoiding most of the incoming fire. On the Defiance, Captain Sam Turner watched his tactical display as enemy missiles approached his ship. "Point defense systems, engage," he ordered calmly. The Defiance's hull bristled with small weapons that tracked the incoming missiles with inhuman precision. Streams of accelerated metal particles intercepted each warhead, detonating them safely away from the ship. Not a single missile reached its target. Lieutenant Beth Adams managed the Liberty's point defense network, her fingers dancing over the controls as she coordinated with the other ships. Earth's military had spent years developing these systems, after studying captured alien technology from crashed ships found in the outer systems. Now that investment was paying off. Admiral Vextar felt cold fear creep into his thoughts as he watched the human ships not only survive his opening attack, but begin to maneuver with deadly purpose. These weren't the actions of a primitive species, caught off guard. These were the movements of experienced warriors who had been preparing for exactly this moment. "Sir," called his tactical officer, "the enemy vessels are moving into attack positions. Their formation is unlike anything in our databases." "How is that possible?" Vexitar demanded. "They're primitives. They shouldn't have any combat experience." Captain Jake Morrison had different ideas about who was primitive. "Ryan, begin the counterattack. Target their weapon systems first. I want to disable them, not destroy them." Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Burke smiled grimly as he activated the Liberty's secret weapon. "Magnetic accelerator ready, sir." Tungsten rods loaded and targeted. The Liberty's hull opened to reveal a weapon that looked deceptively simple. It was basically a long tube with magnetic coils running along its length. But what emerged from that tube traveled at nearly the speed of light and carried the kinetic energy of a nuclear bomb. The tungsten rod struck the lead hegemony cruiser's main plasma cannon with surgical precision. The alien weapon simply ceased to exist, along with a significant portion of the ship's forward hull. Atmosphere vented into space as emergency systems tried to seal the breach. What was that? Admiral Vextar shouted, as alarms sounded throughout his flagship. His science officer was frantically analyzing sensor data. Sir, they fired a solid projectile at nearly light speed. The kinetic energy was enormous. Our shields were completely ineffective against it. More tungsten rods fired from the human fleet, each one aimed with devastating accuracy. The hegemony, ships designed to fight enemies using energy weapons and missiles, had no defense against simple metal traveling at relativistic speeds. Captain Alex Parker commanded the Valor as it executed a flanking maneuver that brought it alongside 3 enemy vessels. His experimental missile systems launched not explosive warheads but specialized electronics packages that attached themselves to the alien hulls. EMP charges deployed, reported his weapons officer. Detonating in 3, 2, 1. The electromagnetic pulses knocked out the electronics on all 3 hegemony ships simultaneously. Their weapons fell silent, their shields collapsed, and their engines shut down. They drifted helplessly as their crews tried to restart their systems. Chief Engineer Rob Phillips aboard the Defiance had developed the EMP weapons based on similar principles to the adaptive shields. If you could analyze alien technology, you could also learn how to disable it. Captain Maya Johnson brought the Courage in close to a damaged enemy vessel. Her ship's electronic warfare systems went to work, penetrating the alien computer networks and downloading everything they could find. Within minutes, she had detailed information about hegemony technology, tactics, and military organization. Captain Morrison, Maya reported over the communication channel, their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming inferior opponents. They have no experience fighting enemies with equal or superior technology. Admiral Vextar realized, with growing horror, that his fleet was being systematically destroyed by opponents he had dismissed as primitive. Half his ships were already disabled or severely damaged, while the human vessels remained completely intact. All ships, concentrate. Fire on their flagship, he ordered desperately. 6 hegemony vessels turned their remaining weapons toward the Liberty. Every plasma cannon and missile tube they still had fired at once, creating a wave of destruction that should have vaporized any ship ever built. The Liberty's adaptive shields flared with brilliant light as they absorbed the massive attack. For a moment it looked like the alien weapons might succeed. Then the light faded and the human flagship emerged completely undamaged. Impossible, Vextar whispered. Captain Jake Morrison opened a communication channel to the alien admiral. Admiral Vexistar, your weapons are ineffective against our defenses, and your ships are no match for our offense. I'm giving you one chance to surrender before we disable your flagship as well. The hegemony does not surrender to primitives, Vextar snarled. Then you've made your choice, Jake replied sadly. Ryan, disable their weapons and engines. Try to keep casualties to a minimum. The Liberty fired again, this time targeting the Admiral's flagship. Tungsten rods struck with perfect precision, destroying weapons and engine systems while leaving the crew areas intact. The massive hegemony vessel went dead in space, its power failing as emergency systems struggled to maintain life support. Commander Lisa Grant coordinated with the other human captains as they prepared for the next phase of their plan. Marine Colonel Pete Watson was already organizing boarding parties to secure the disabled alien vessels. Sir, Amy Rodriguez reported, I'm intercepting communications between the remaining enemy ships. They're requesting permission to retreat. Jake looked at the tactical display. Of the 12 hegemony ships, 8 were completely disabled and 4 were severely damaged but still functional. His own fleet hadn't suffered so much as a scratch. "Signal the undamaged vessels," Jake ordered. "Tell them they're free to leave, but they go alone. The disabled ships and their crews are now prisoners of war." Admiral Vextar found himself facing a reality he had never imagined. His mighty fleet, representative of the most powerful military force in the galaxy, had been defeated by 5 ships from a species they had never heard of before today. The age of hegemony dominance was ending, and these humans had barely begun to show what they could do. The battle was over in less than 6 hours, but the implications would last for centuries. Admiral Vextar sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed the complete destruction of his fleet's combat capability. 8 of his 12 ships were dead in space, their crews imprisoned by human boarding parties. The remaining 4 vessels limped away toward hegemony space, carrying news that would shake the Empire to its core. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of Admiral Vexatar's flagship, now under human control. Marine Colonel Pete Watson had led the boarding operation with textbook precision. The alien crew had surrendered without further resistance once they realized their situation was hopeless. "Report, Colonel," Jake said as he met Watson in the ship's main corridor. "Minimal casualties on both sides, sir," Watson replied. "The alien crew was shocked that we didn't execute them immediately. Apparently that's standard procedure in the hegemony when they capture enemy ships." Jake nodded grimly. That piece of information told him a lot about what kind of civilization they were dealing with. He continued toward the bridge where Admiral Vexatar waited under guard. Meanwhile, on the Liberty, Intelligence Officer Commander Julie Baker was analyzing the treasure trove of information they had captured. The alien computer systems had been surprisingly easy to penetrate once Captain Johnson's electronic warfare team had broken their encryption codes. "Captain Morrison was right to be prepared," Julie muttered as she reviewed hegemony military records. "They've been expanding through this part of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Every species they've encountered has either been enslaved or destroyed." Dr. Helen Brooks worked alongside Julie, studying the cultural and biological data they had obtained. What she found was disturbing, but not entirely surprising. "The hegemony has never fought a war against equals," Helen reported to Commander Grant over the communication system. "Every conflict in their record shows them attacking civilizations with inferior technology. They don't even have concepts for tactical retreat or defensive fighting." This explained why Admiral Vextar's fleet had been so vulnerable despite their superior numbers and firepower. They had been trained to overwhelm weaker opponents, not to engage in actual combat against a prepared enemy. Captain Sam Turner commanded the Defiance as it kept watch over the captured vessels. His crew was working with human engineers to understand alien technology while ensuring the prisoners remained secure. "Their weapons are impressive," reported Chief Engineer Rob Phillips, "but they're designed for maximum intimidation rather than efficiency. A lot of their systems are needlessly complex, probably to impress primitive species they encounter." Captain Alex Parker had similar observations aboard the Valor. "Their ships are built like floating fortresses, sir. Heavily armored and armed, but not very maneuverable. They clearly expect their enemies to either run away or stand still and get shot." The 2 frigates, Courage and Freedom, had taken on the job of processing the alien prisoners. Captain Maya Johnson's team conducted interviews while Captain Steve Collins managed security. What they learned was enlightening. "Most of these soldiers have never been in a real battle," Collins reported. "They've participated in what they call suppression actions against primitives, but those were basically just executions. This is the first time they've faced return fire." Captain Johnson had even more interesting news. "Sir, several of the prisoners want to defect. They're from conquered species that the hegemony forced into military service. They see us as potential liberators." Jake finally reached the bridge of the alien flagship. Admiral Vextar looked up as he entered, his black eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and confusion. "Captain Morrison," the alien said slowly, "I demand to know how a primitive species acquired such advanced technology." Jake sat down across from the Admiral, studied his face for a moment, then smiled. "Admiral, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here. We're not primitive, we're just new to your neighborhood." "That's impossible. Our scouts surveyed your system decades ago. You barely had chemical rockets." "Your scouts surveyed our system 37 years ago," Jake corrected. "A lot can happen in 37 years when you're really motivated to improve." The truth was that humanity had detected those scouts and captured one of their automated probes. Earth's best scientists had spent decades reverse engineering alien technology while developing countermeasures and improvements. "You see, Admiral," Jake continued, "when we realized we weren't alone in the universe, we also realized we might not be welcome. So we prepared. We studied your technology, learned your language, and developed strategies specifically designed to defeat hegemony forces." Vextar's confusion deepened. "But why would you prepare for war? Why didn't you seek peaceful contact?" Jake pulled out a datapad and showed the alien some of the information they had captured from his ship's computers. "Because we learned about your history, Admiral. 3,000 years of conquest. Hundreds of species enslaved or exterminated. Did you really think we would just surrender our freedom to you?" The Admiral stared at the data, seeing his own civilization's record of brutality displayed by his captors. For the first time in his life, he was forced to view the hegemony from an outside perspective. Amy Rodriguez's voice came through Jake's communicator. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. They want a full report on first contact." "Tell them we'll have a comprehensive briefing ready within 6 hours," Jake replied. "And Amy, make sure they understand that we're going to need a lot more ships out here." Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan had been studying the alien vessels with growing excitement. "Sir, their technology is actually inferior to ours in most areas. They rely on brute force rather than elegant solutions. I think we can improve on almost everything they've got." This was the most shocking revelation of all. The mighty hegemony, terror of the galaxy, had been coasting on their reputation for centuries. They had grown complacent, relying on fear, rather than innovation to maintain their dominance. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Burke reviewed the tactical data from the battle. "Captain, if this fleet is representative of their military capabilities, then the hegemony is much weaker than they want anyone to believe. They're a paper tiger." Jake nodded thoughtfully. Humanity had prepared for the possibility of encountering a superior alien civilization. Instead, they had found bullies who had never been challenged by anyone capable of fighting back. "Admiral," Jake said to his prisoner, "I'm going to send you home with a message for your government. Tell them that humanity is not interested in conquest or empire, but we will not tolerate aggression against our people or our territory." Vextar looked up at him with something approaching respect. "And if the hegemony decides to send a larger fleet?" Jake's smile was cold. "Then they'll discover that this was just a small patrol group, and we've been preparing for much larger battles. Admiral, your people fired first. Everything that happens next is a consequence of that decision." The alien admiral realized that he had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history, the birth of a new major power. Humanity had announced itself not as supplicant seeking acceptance, but as a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 days after the battle, Captain Jake Morrison stood in his ready room aboard the UES Liberty, composing what would become one of the most important messages in human history. Through the viewport, he could see the captured hegemony vessels being prepared for their journey back to alien space. Admiral Vextar had been released along with half his crew, but they would be traveling in ships loaded with human technology and carrying a message that would change everything. The other half of the prisoners had chosen to remain with the humans, either as defectors or as subjects for cultural exchange. Commander Lisa Grant entered the ready room carrying a data pad filled with intelligence reports. "Sir, the information we've gathered is extraordinary. The hegemony controls over 400 systems, but their actual military strength is much weaker than we expected." Jake looked up from his message. "How so?" "Most of their fleet consists of ships designed to intimidate rather than fight. They have maybe 50 vessels that could pose a real threat to our current technology. The rest are just for show, meant to keep conquered species in line." This confirmed what Jake had suspected during the battle. The hegemony had built their empire on fear and overwhelming force against inferior opponents. When faced with prepared resistance from technological equals, their entire strategy fell apart. Dr. Helen Brooks had spent the last 3 days interviewing alien prisoners from various species. Her findings painted a picture of an empire held together by terror rather than loyalty. "Captain," Helen reported over the communication system, "at least 60% of hegemony military personnel are from conquered species. They serve because they have no choice, but many would rebel if they thought they had a chance of success." Intelligence Officer Julie Baker had been analyzing captured hegemony communication networks. "Sir, their government is in panic mode. News of our victory has already reached their capital, and they're trying to decide how to respond. Some factions want to negotiate, others are calling for massive retaliation." Jake nodded and returned to his message. It needed to be perfect, because it would establish humanity's position in galactic affairs for generations to come. On the bridge, Amy Rodriguez monitored communications from the other human ships. Captain Sam Turner reported that the Defiance had completed its analysis of alien weapons technology. Captain Alex Parker's team on the Valor had successfully reverse-engineered hegemony shield systems. The frigates Courage and Freedom had gathered detailed intelligence on alien military organization and tactics. Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan coordinated with her counterparts on the other ships to compile a comprehensive technical report. "Captain, we've learned more about alien technology in 3 days than our scientists discovered in 30 years of studying that crashed probe." Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Burke was already planning improvements to human military doctrine based on what they had learned. "Sir, if we face them again, we'll be even more prepared. Their tactics are predictable once you understand their psychology." Marine Colonel Pete Watson had been working with the alien defectors, learning about hegemony, internal politics, and military structure. "Captain, there are entire sectors of their empire that are barely controlled. If word spreads that someone successfully resisted them, we could see widespread rebellions." Jake finished his message and called his senior staff to the ready room. They gathered around the conference table where he had displayed a star map showing both human and hegemony territory. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake began, "we came out here to explore and map new systems for human colonization. Instead, we've started what might become the most important war in galactic history." Commander Grant leaned forward. "Sir, do you think it will come to war?" "I think it already has," Jake replied. "The question is whether it will be a short conflict that establishes mutual respect, or a long struggle that reshapes the entire galaxy." He activated the star map, showing the positions of both fleets and the probable response routes from hegemony space. They have 3 basic options. They can accept that humanity is a legitimate power and open diplomatic relations. They can send a larger fleet to try to destroy us and maintain their reputation for invincibility. Or they can ignore us and hope we don't become a larger problem. Dr. Brooks shook her head. "Based on what I've learned about their culture, ignoring us isn't an option. Their entire system of government depends on the belief that they're unstoppable. If word spreads that a small human fleet defeated them, their empire could collapse from internal rebellions." Jake stood up and walked to the viewport where he could see Admiral Vextar's ship, preparing to depart. Then they'll send a larger fleet. The question is, will it be large enough? Chief Sullivan smiled grimly. Sir, Earth Command has been building ships in secret for 15 years. If they want a real war, we can give them one. Jake activated his communication system and sent a message to Earth Command, the lunar shipyards, and the Mars defense stations. All commands, this is Captain Morrison. First contact has been made with a hostile alien empire called the Hegemony. They fired first and have been defeated. Recommend immediate implementation of Defense Protocol 7. We are no longer alone, and we are probably about to be at war. He then opened a channel to Admiral Vextar's ship. Admiral, you're free to depart whenever you're ready. You're carrying our message to your government, along with complete technical specifications of the weapons we used against your fleet. Vextar's image appeared on the screen. The alien admiral looked older than he had 3 days ago, as if the defeat had aged him. Captain Morrison, why are you giving us information about your weapons? Because, Admiral, we want your leaders to understand exactly what they're dealing with. Those specifications will show them that our technology is not only equal to yours but superior in most areas. Hopefully that knowledge will encourage them to choose diplomacy over warfare. And if they choose warfare anyway? Jake's expression became cold. Then they'll discover that the weapons we used against you were just our opening move. Earth has been preparing for this possibility for decades, Admiral. We really don't want a war, but if you insist on giving us one, you're going to lose. The alien admiral stared at him for a long moment. Captain, I believe you, but I'm not sure my government will listen to reason. The hegemony has never backed down from a challenge. Then they're about to learn something new, Jake replied. Safe journey, Admiral. The communication ended, and Jake watched as the alien ships activated their engines and departed for hegemony space. Within hours, news of humanity's existence and military capability would reach the highest levels of alien government. Commander Grant joined him at the viewport. Sir, what do you think will happen? Jake continued watching until the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace. I think, Lisa, that the galaxy just became a much more interesting place. We've proven that the hegemony can be defeated, which means their empire is built on a foundation of lies. Whether they admit it or not, everything has changed. He turned away from the viewport and faced his crew. Send a message to all human colonies and outposts. Tell them to prepare for possible alien contact, both hostile and friendly. The age of human isolation is over. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her station. Captain, what should we tell Earth about our next move? Jake smiled as he looked at the star map showing unexplored systems beyond hegemony territory. Tell them we're continuing our original mission. We came out here to find new worlds for humanity, and that's exactly what we're going to do. But now we're doing it as citizens of a galaxy where everyone knows that humans don't back down from bullies. The UES Liberty and her escort fleet set course for the next system on their survey list. Behind them, they left the wreckage of hegemony invincibility. Ahead of them lay an unknown galaxy that would soon learn what it meant to underestimate humanity. The message Admiral Vextar carried would reach Hegemony High Command in 2 weeks. The response would determine whether humanity's first contact would be remembered as the beginning of a new age of cooperation, or as the opening battle of the war that freed the galaxy from 3,000 years of tyranny. Either way, the universe would never be the same again.